My easy fried chicken recipe is a great way to make this Southern classic at home. Although there are just as many versions as there are home chefs, almost all of the recipes start out by soaking the chicken in buttermilk. Although I've done that before and it is good, I've always felt like it was missing something. Recently, I stumbled upon a video by Miss Maymay of Maymay's Happy Table, and she got me thinking about the brine and what I do for other chicken recipes, a more Argentine style chicken that I make. So I am revisiting my homemade fried chicken recipe, and I'm going to make some changes to the buttermilk brine. Here I have 4 pounds of chicken, legs and thighs, and I'm going to soak them in buttermilk. I'm not sure exactly how much buttermilk I'm going to need, so I am going to count the cups as I add them. For those of you who don't know, a brine is basically just salty water in which you soak meat so that it turns out nice and tender. First one. That was 2 cups. For those of you who don't know, a brine is basically a salty liquid in which you soak meat so that it turns out nice and moist. The acidity in buttermilk ensures that the meat is tender, and I started thinking, why don't I try both? In Miss Maymay's video, she does a saltwater brine, and she said it's amazing. So like I said, I'm going to add some salt and other spices to my buttermilk brine. I think it's going to make the chicken nice and moist and well seasoned while also making it tender. That was 4 cups of buttermilk. I have some more. I may add another cup or 2 and then I'll bring you back. I ended up adding a total of 5 cups of buttermilk. I'm going to add 1 cup of water, so a total of 6 cups of liquid. For a normal brine, for every 1 cup of water, most sources will tell you to add 1 tablespoon of salt. I know a lot of people use kosher salt, but I have table salt, so that's what I'm using. I've done that, and it's good, but it's kind of salty, so I'm going to cut down the salt to 5 tablespoons. So here I have 5 tablespoons of table salt. I'm going to dissolve right in here. Maybe half I'll put in there, half I'll put into the water. But honestly, I think it's going to dissolve in the buttermilk, so I'll probably be okay. As you can see, I have some other things that I'm going to be adding to the buttermilk brine as well. Usually when I brine chicken, it's just salt water, but Miss Maymay added some sugar. Some other people online added sugar as well. Seems like usually people add half the amount of sugar as salt. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of white sugar. Going to add 1 small onion chopped up, along with 3 cloves of garlic that I chopped into pieces as well. If you know me, you know I like bay leaf, so I'm adding 3 small bay leaves. And now for the spices. I'm going to add more spices later, but I'm going to add some to the brine as well, just to see if I can get that flavor to really penetrate. Half a teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and cayenne pepper. I also added 1/4 cup of Louisiana style hot sauce to the buttermilk brine. I know that sounds like quite a lot if you've never made fried chicken at home before, but in my opinion, I don't think it really made the chicken spicy. I think the hot sauce may have helped with color and flavor to some extent, and the vinegar might have helped to tenderize the meat a bit more. But if you want legitimately hot fried chicken, you'll have to add hot sauce to the egg wash as well as some cayenne pepper or something like that. We'll get into that later. Once your buttermilk brine is done, you have to let the chicken sit in the brine for at least 4 hours. But overnight, 8 to 12 hours is better. I actually let my chicken both times sit in the buttermilk brine for 24 hours. Quite a long time. The next step in my easy fried chicken recipe is breading the chicken. At this point, the recipes, when you research Southern fried chicken, they kind of diverge a little bit. Some people take the chicken right out of the buttermilk into flour with seasoning. Some people wipe off the buttermilk, then into the flour. Some people take it out of the buttermilk into an egg and spice wash and then into flour. That's probably what I'm going to do because it kind of reminds me of my Argentine milanesas with the eggs. Here in this small bowl, I have 4 large eggs that I'm going to beat very quickly. And to the eggs, I am going to add some spices. Here I have 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and half a teaspoon of oregano. I know I did not add oregano to the brine, but I'm curious as to how oregano will work in this. We're going to give it a try. I am going to just add the spices to my eggs. At this point, am not going to I'm not going to add spices to the flour. When I think about my milanesas, I add spices to the eggs, not to the breadcrumbs. And I was watching a video by Alton Brown, and he said that he does not add spices to the flour because some spices can actually burn. And that does make sense. I know paprika burns and things like that, so I'm gonna try it this way, adding spices to the egg wash instead. I'm gonna add a little more hot sauce. I'm gonna add probably the equivalent of 1 tablespoon. So I want it to be hot, but not overpoweringly so. It's almost, 1 tablespoon. Here I have a pizza pan with parchment paper where I'm going to put my chicken. Probably should have used a deeper bowl, but that's okay. And I should have beaten this off camera, but oh well. Now that everything is ready, I am going to take a piece of chicken. I'm going to take it, I'm going to let it drip. I don't want the chicken to be swimming in the buttermilk. So notice I'm not wiping it down, I'm just shaking off the excess. I'm putting the chicken into the spiced egg wash, making sure it's coated. And if the chicken skin is coming off, getting some of the coating underneath the chicken skin. And now for the breading. You could put it in a shallow plate, but I am going to shake it in a bag. And in terms of flour, there are a couple of things you could do. You could use regular all-purpose flour, but I was reading that adding cornstarch seems to make it crispier. So I did 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour and about half a cup of cornstarch. No salt. I'm not adding any extra salt to this because the chicken soaked in the salty brine for a long time, so I don't think it needs any salt. Here I am. Now into the flour. I'm probably going to need more flour eventually. But just to start off with, like I said, 1 cup of all-purpose flour and half a cup of cornstarch. I am going to continue breading the chicken. Then I'm going to let the chicken rest for half an hour, and then it will be time to fry. Although my fried chicken turned out great, I made it again just to see how a few tweaks to the recipe would change things. The biggest difference was that the second time I used smaller pieces of chicken. The first time I used 4 pounds of legs and thighs, and the second time I bought a cut up chicken, 2 legs, 2 wings, 2 thighs, and 2 breasts, altogether being 2.88 pounds. I've heard Paula Deen and other southern chefs say that the best chicken for frying is a smaller chicken, somewhere between 2 to 3 pounds. So I wanted to see how using smaller pieces of chicken would affect the recipe. I also wanted to see if spices added directly to the flour would burn, so I added 1 teaspoon each of black pepper, oregano, garlic powder, and onion powder directly to the flour. I also added slightly over half a teaspoon of each of those spices to the egg wash, along with 2 tablespoons of hot sauce instead of 1. I forgot to add bay leaf to the buttermilk brine, and I didn't add quite as much sugar. But really, the main thing I wanted to try out the second time that I made my easy fried chicken recipe was to see how using smaller pieces of chicken would affect the recipe, along with seeing how white meat compared to dark meat. But other than those few tweaks, I did the exact same process. 24-hour buttermilk brine, egg wash with spices and hot sauce into the flour, which this time had seasonings, and then onto wax paper to dry for about an hour. Now it's time to fry the chicken. It's been sitting out at room temperature for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. I'm not sure exactly, but I've heard that if it looks wet, that means that it's ready, so I guess it's ready. Here in this 10-inch skillet, I have 2 cups of canola oil that I've been heating on high heat for about 5 minutes. I'm going to check to see if it's ready. You can put in some flour to see if it sizzles, which it does, or you can put in the end of a wooden spoon and it sizzles like that. Like I said, it took about 5 minutes on high heat. Now I'm just going to place in my chicken skin side down. Let's do this. Now I'm going to turn the heat down to medium, gas mark 3 at a 6, and cook it. I want it to keep frying, but I think that it needs to be at a lower temperature. And actually I probably should have turned it down to medium right when I put it in. It's been 8 or 9 minutes since I put in the first piece of chicken. I didn't really move it around that much. You're really not supposed to if you want the breading to stick. Just to check it, and here the breast part was kind of sticking out of the oil, so I pressed it down once just to see if I could get that a bit more brown. Now it's been, like I said, 9 minutes. Let's check this leg. That looks good. I'm gonna flip it. It's been almost 11 minutes since I flipped the chicken, so let's take a look at it. Leave this to be a thigh. Looks nice and brown. I think this is probably done. I'm gonna put that off to the side. Let's take a look at the bottom of this leg. Looks to be done. I actually want to get it a little more brown on that side, so I'm going to flip it over, put it back in. That may or may not have been a good idea. We'll see. Let's take a look at this breast. Nice and brown. Ooh. And you did not see that. Trying to film with a tripod in the way is difficult. It's been about a minute since I took out the chicken. You can see it is perfectly golden brown. I'm very happy with how it looks. Now I'm just kind of skimming out little bits here and there so that they don't sit in the oil and make it turn bitter. And now I'm going to add in the second round. I'm going to keep the heat. Well, let's see how hot it is. I actually might turn it up for about a minute and then I'll add my second batch. It actually only took maybe 30 seconds. You can see when I add in some flour, it looks like it's ready. So in goes the second batch. I'm going to try to see if I can pack more in this time than I did last time. I want to get these wings in there. This second batch of fried chicken has cooked on its first side for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to flip it. It's been on medium heat, guess mark 3 out of 6. I brought it up to temperature on 6, and then I put it in at 6. And once the chicken was in the pan, I turned it down to medium. I'm probably going to cook it another 10 minutes, maybe 8 on this side, and then it will be done. And then I will add this breast. I might flip back over again, we'll see. And actually this wing I think is going to be done early as well. It's been 10 minutes since I turned the second batch. I took out the wing maybe a minute and a half ago because I felt like it was already brown on both sides. I would show you, but I don't want to drop it. The leg, I believe, is done. The piece over here. Honestly, I think that's a bit overdone, but it's gonna be okay. And let's look at the breast. It's done. The first day that I made my homemade fried chicken, I did exactly the same thing. The main difference was that I let the chicken sit in the oil a bit longer before flipping it, 10 to 12 minutes per side. If you're really concerned about it, I would check the chicken after 8 minutes, but for most pieces of chicken, I think it's going to take about 10 minutes per side, maybe even up to 12. I also wanted to point out that even though white meat is said to cook faster than dark meat, the breasts, I left them in the oil for just as long as I did the legs and thighs, so we'll see how that turned out soon. Although my southern fried chicken recipe is easy, I have to admit it does have a lot of steps. Given that it has a lot of steps and there are a lot of things to keep in mind, I think I did a pretty good job. Here you can see the legs and thighs of the first day that I made fried chicken, and honestly, I think it might have turned out a little bit better on that day. Although there were parts of a few pieces of chicken that were a bit darker than I would have liked, overall, I think my chicken turned out a perfectly golden brown. I forgot to take a video clip of me tapping a piece of chicken with a fork to show you that it was crispy, but trust me, this chicken skin was definitely nice and crispy. It wasn't soggy at all. So I'm guessing that adding a bit of cornstarch helped to crisp up the skin. But how did my homemade fried chicken taste? It tasted amazing. The brine definitely helped to not only make the meat nice and juicy and tender, but it also made the meat very flavorful. The salt and the sugar penetrating deep into the meat. Although I honestly couldn't really taste any of the other flavors like the garlic or the onion or the oregano or even the hot sauce in the meat itself, the crispy skin definitely did have all of those flavors. Now with the leg up close, you can see just how juicy the meat is and how crispy the skin is. There were two main differences between the 2 days. Without a doubt, the smaller pieces of chicken definitely were more tender. So I guess that Paula Deen was right about frying chicken. Smaller pieces, even though they have less meat, are better. However, at the same time, I felt like the flavor was not as good on the second day. I'm not exactly sure why. I know I did leave out the bay leaf and I didn't put as much sugar as I did into the brine. But other than that, the only significant difference was that I added some spices to the flour on the second day. And on the second day, although the skin was definitely good, there were a few times when it tasted a bit bitter. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what happened, but I think that maybe Alton Brown was onto something when he suggested not to add spices to the flour. Something else to keep in mind is that on the second day, I brined the chicken for just as long, but the pieces were a bit smaller. So maybe they were over brined. I'm not sure. But if I had to guess, I would say that some of the spices probably did burn in the flour on the second day. One more thing that I wanted to point out was the chicken breast. Even though I cooked it for just as long as the legs and the thighs, it was still nice and juicy and tender. I'm thinking it was the brine that helped. I know this video is kind of long, but I wanted to show you all of the steps involved in making homemade fried chicken. Even though it is easy, it does have a lot of steps and there are a lot of variables. I think the reason why there are so many variations of recipes and why it's kind of hard to give you an exact method is that everyone likes something different, and also different pieces of chicken are different sizes. So cook time and maybe brining time will be different. You have to watch it and experiment. I'm not saying that my way is perfect, but I think that this video is a good overview of the general process of making homemade southern fried chicken. Be sure to check out Miss Maymay's video recipe as well as other chefs' take on making homemade southern fried chicken like Paula Deen and Alton Brown. As always, Thanks for watching. See you next time.